Sometimes it feels like prolapse is in this other category and it's not a true injury. Several weeks ago, someone who watches my videos actually asked me, is prolapse an injury? Which I thought was a really interesting question because in my world, it's really obvious that prolapse is an injury. But that kind of got me thinking about women and prolapse, and maybe that so many women feel like because prolapse isn't really an injury, maybe you can't work on healing it. And so I want to talk a little bit about that with you today. So in the injury world, a lot of times we think about injuries in two categories. There's the overuse injury, like say if you're out training for a marathon and like over time, your knees start to bother you and you're thinking, oh, this is an overuse injury. Or you take up swimming and after 3 months of swimming, you start getting rotator cuff tendonitis and you think, oh, this is an overuse injury. Well, the same thing can happen with prolapse where the symptoms kind of sneak up on you, right? There's like a time in your life where you start to have stress incontinence, right? Where you used to be able to jump rope, 100 times without a problem. And suddenly, or not so suddenly, you start feeling like every time I jump rope, I leak. Or now I'm at a certain age, women of a certain age feel like they can't laugh or cough or sneeze or do anything impact or lift something heavy, or they leak. And then we have acute injury. So an acute injury is something that happens all of a sudden. You're playing baseball and you're running to third base and you skid out and you twist your ankle. That would be an acute injury. Something that happens all of a sudden. A sprained ankle, you lift something off the floor and all of a sudden your back hurts. Something like that is considered an acute injury. Something that sort of comes up out of nowhere. I was fine 1 minute and the next minute I wasn't. A car accident. Something happens that makes it so that all of a sudden you are injured when 2 minutes before that you had been totally fine. So let's relate that to prolapse symptoms, or sometimes it's like a stress incontinence symptoms where you are having incontinence or leaking under stress. So anything that causes everything to load down in your pelvic floor causes you to leak. That is stress incontinence. And most of the time, that sort of builds on you over time. I think as a woman who has prolapse, I can think of times where I was not leaking, and that typically was before kids. So before kids, I could sprint and I could run and I could lift and I could do all sorts of things, and I never leaked. I did not have any issues with leaking. I think after childbirth, my first time about 15 years ago, I started taking up my exercise again at the 6-week mark. I started hitting it hard after having a baby, which is what the doctors tell you. They say at 6 weeks, you're good to go. And I probably laced up my shoes on that 6-week mark. And I bet you I went out and ran a couple miles at least. So there was a trauma from childbirth. So there's that. But on top of that, I didn't allow myself to heal. And so over the last 16 years, I have been kind of trying to manage this stress incontinence symptom, which was annoying, but it didn't hurt. It wasn't painful. So I didn't pay a ton of attention to it. So what happened was about 2 years ago, I had a feeling like I had a tampon in incorrectly. And most of you know what that feels like, but I did not have a tampon in. So it was a little bit alarming. I had no idea what was going on. And within a few weeks, I got in to see my doctor and spoke to her about this. And she confirmed, but she said that my prolapse really wasn't that bad and that I shouldn't really limit it stopping me from doing anything. Now, I don't really agree with that. I feel like if something doesn't feel right or something's not sitting right or something's red flagging that it needs help, I pretty much pull myself back and I pay attention to it. Now, some other people feel their prolapse a little bit differently, and there might be back pain, hip pain, sort of a heavy feeling, that kind of like more of a vague heaviness or that kind of thing. So symptoms can vary depending on who you are. So knowing now what I did not understand 2 years ago is that childbirth can cause nerve damage in your pelvic floor region. And that nerve damage will actually cause dysfunction in how your pelvic floor muscles contract and relax in accordance with your diaphragm up above. So it causes this dysfunction. And that's where a lot of your issues can stem from. This is just what you want to be thinking about if you are really frustrated with where you are with your prolapse right now. I'm going to tell you that prolapse and or stress incontinence is just like any other injury. And just like with any other injury, it may take weeks, months, maybe more than that. If it's a nerve damage issue, it can take 18 months to help fix, of therapy to help to, get it back to normal. So it can take a long time to fix. And just like any other injury, it can go like this. You're feeling better, you've got a setback. You're feeling better, you've got a step back. You're feeling better, you've got a setback. You're feeling better, and you've got a setback. But you can see that the trend is trending up. And that's what happens when you are focusing on taking the time to heal, educating yourself, avoiding things that hurt, making sure you're doing things that are good for it so that your trend line goes up, even though there are some days or weeks where you feel like you're at a standstill and that you're not doing that progress, and it can be super frustrating. But just like any other injury, I am convinced that it can get much, much, much better, if not totally reverse. My name is June Melia. I have been a certified personal trainer for 25 years, and I have dealt with prolapse. I am dressed right now to go out for a run. So mine is really on the upswing, and I took about 18 months now to really focus on making it better. I'm not 100%, but man, am I better than I used to be. If you want more information about prolapse, about pelvic floor strength, about being a woman of a certain age when you're starting to hit perimenopause or menopause, that can also impact your pelvic floor. I would love it if you would like and subscribe to my channel. And I'm gonna leave for you this video right here that is sharing with you things you need to avoid if you want to start getting your pelvic floor prolapse symptoms to improve. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next video.